What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Optimize You podcast, the place where we're providing you guys with as much value as possible in order to help optimize you. Health, nutrition, fitness, wellness, mindset, everything in between. And today we got my guest and my man, as always, Alex. What's going on, brother?
What is going on, dude? So right now I'm looking at a window that got broken yesterday from the golf course. So I got I live right on a golf course, and it's within range. Obviously, clearly now we know for sure it's within range.
Striking
People
distance.
are really bad at golf too. I could probably hit my place if I hit a bad shot too. But
Bro, I've hit him.
Oh yeah. I actually, the last round I played, I was hitting it all over the place, and I hit a few houses. It was rough. But I come into my place yesterday. I was out and about, and I come back in, and like there's glass all over the place, and I'm like, what?
At your place?
Yeah. Oh, I walk
No
in,
shit.
there's glass everywhere. Like literally, like if you look all the way across the room, there's glass. There's still glass that I didn't clean up on the seat of my bench over there.
No way.
There's still some on there. I haven't cleaned it up yet, but it was literally crazy. A golf ball was like right over by my TV. It just destroyed the glass. Luckily, it's not straight. It's not glass. It's like plexiglass. So it was, it wasn't like I wasn't stepping around. And Coco's kennel is like right down here. And so she had to scare the shit out of Coco. So I guess that's a con of living on a golf course, is that you are within striking range of golf balls.
I'm sure the office or where you live at, they're probably so used to replacing those, huh?
Yeah, they have like a relationship with some glass company. I literally called somebody and they came, patched it up, put me on the list for glass replacement. So they did a good job. They did a good job with it, but it's like, oh fuck. Now I'm like kind of in the back of my head thinking, I was like, what if that came through now? Like that is like this window is like right here, like that. You might see me knocked out cold.
It's karma for the amount of houses that you've hit over your career, right?
Probably.
You're on the other side of it now. Yeah. You're the owner.
Exactly. What goes around comes around. You hit enough houses. I've probably broken a window in my day,
Oh, dude, I've broken windows. I've chipped off sheetrock, like, those. Dude, I've done it for sure. I've done it all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. But how are you doing, brother?
I'm great, man. It's just finished my 16-week program. I was telling you, I'm gradually bumping up my calories so I can keep my results, and fighting some strong cravings right now because my body likes the extra calories and it wants to just go, foot to the floor on the gas pedal, and I got to pull back the reins a little bit and, show some control here. But other than that, it's going good, man. I wish the weather was a little bit better. The fish are biting really good right now, but it's just whether you want to go out and endure the elements, because they're getting ready to that fall transition into the wintertime. They're getting ready to kind of slow down. So they're eating like crazy right now, which is a really good bite to go fish. But man, it's cold, windy, and wet out there too. So
got to be willing to freeze your ass off.
Good. Yeah.
How low did your calories go? Like, what was the lowest you brought your calories during the 16?
The lowest I pushed it to is 2,300. Okay. The majority of where I was at, I was for probably 8-9 weeks out of the 16 in total, I was at 2,700. And then for those last quarter, I split it between 2,500. And then just the last 2 weeks, I went 2,300 and kind of just pushed it a little hard. Which is crazy because I actually used to maintain at 25 to 2,700. And this time around, I was able to put myself in a caloric deficit at 25 to 2,700. So that was a good feeling. And I was like losing weight quick, man. Like my body fat was going down quick.
Where was your maintenance at then when you started? What did you build yourself up to before you went into the deficit?
Yeah. So before, originally I was at like 2,700, it was really, and then I boosted it up gradually to 32 to 3,300. 3,300 was like my highest right there. I went over 3,300, but then I started to gain a little too much and I didn't like it. I was getting a little too heavy. So I was like, okay, I pulled back on that one just a little bit. And I was only walking 6,000 steps too. So I could have walked more and, made my maintenance a little bit more doable with higher caloric intake, but I wasn't willing to. I was like, I just want to stay at 6,000 steps right now. I know that's not much. And eating 3,300 calories with my resistance training, like I was maintaining right around 217, 218 on my body weight. And then when I decided to go into a deficit, I cut down to 2,700 to start, and man, it started coming right off. Like, so because I had been at 3,300 for like the last 6 months or so, 5.5, 6 months. So I was there for a while, which I haven't done in traditional like cuts or diets. I usually just go wherever I'm at. In this case, it would have been 2,700 and then take myself in a deficit, not knowing that I could have boosted my calories for a little bit longer there and like get more bang for my buck and get more fuel and use that energy in my workouts and focus on building muscle. Like, so this time I actually did that, and man, it was literally the easiest diet that I've ever had. Like the going through those 16 weeks, super easy. Because I didn't feel like I was dieting. I'm like, dude, I used to maintain at 27, 2,500 and I'm losing body fat right now. So it was cool. It was fun.
Dude, that's the benefit of building those calories up, man. That's what so many people out there they decide one day that they're going to lose weight and they just cut their calories. Right. Yeah. And then it takes such a longer process because they're probably not eating that much anyway in the first place. They're probably not feeling that good. And so just taking that time, even if for just a few months, right? Like just taking a few months to build those calories up and focus on building muscle, getting yourself into a place where your body's burning more calories at rest. All of a sudden you go in and you see those amazing results like you did, just literally melting off.
Dude, if you could be patient, like the more patient you are in the process, your process becomes easier. And I've found that time and time again. I've found instances not only when I rush it, but when my clients rush it too, and they want to go into it fast. That's why I'm more like strict with them now and really setting my foot down and telling them like, no, you're not ready, and like letting them go into a fat loss phase after they've earned it, after they've boosted their calories and they've been there for a really long time, to the point where they're like, all right, these are the signs that I look for from my clients, is if they're telling me like, all right, Matt, this is a lot of food to eat. Like this is a challenge. This has become a chore to eat this much food. Then I'm like, okay, cool. They're good. They're ready to go now. If they're not, and they're kind of just hanging out and they're like, all right, I'm ready to go into fat loss phase, and they're super eager and they're ready to diet and they want to lose weight and they signed up and then that's what they're expecting. I have to explain there's a process here, right? There's a sustainable process. You can make your life way easier by setting yourself up for success in a preseason phase, is what I call it. Man, you can make your dieting experience so much more enjoyable, have so much more flexibility. But it takes a little legwork up front. If you're willing to do that, I promise you your experience in fat loss will be so much more enjoyable. It'll be more fun. You'll have more flexibility. You won't have to cut your calories as low. And then over that time of 16 weeks, I wanted to keep my calories at 2,700 as much as I possibly could. So what I started doing was just boosting my 6,000 steps to 7,000 to 8,000, right? So I could keep eating more food and keep getting results. So, it's always a game of pulling those levers. I really didn't want to change my caloric intake at all. So I like kept it there for as long as I could, like 9 and some weeks, like 9-10 weeks. I kept them at 2,700 before I took it down to 25. And then the last 2 weeks, just for the hell of it, I took it down to 23 just because I could, and I was trying to have fun with it. I didn't need to. It was still moving in the right direction, but it was more so a test for myself. But yeah, man.
I love it, dude. Yeah, that patience is key. That's something today, I was having struggle with patience today. I yelled at somebody in the car. Took over 2 hours for my oil change to happen. So I was getting very impatient at the end of it. I was like, oh my God, come on. Like, this is absurd. I didn't bring anything either. I assumed it was going to be like 45 minutes or an hour. So I just brought my AirPods and I was just watching my battery just die basically because I was watching YouTube videos and doing a bunch of bullshit. So
you were hangry.
Oh, I was actually. I didn't eat. It was a weird time, and so I ate like a little snack before, and then I was starving by the time I got back. But that was probably it. I just was not. I was hungry. What do you say we get into it? So we got alcohol today, guys. We got alcohol. Big hot topic, right? I know when I started my fitness journey, I've talked about my struggles on this podcast a handful of times, probably a ton of times actually. I've talked about my struggles with alcohol. And the fact, actually, about a month from today that we're recording on November 6th, I'm actually reaching my 2.5 months of sobriety. And so just another little tiny milestone. And I actually talked about this on a different podcast episode, but the last month I got close to going back to drinking. It was, I told you, Matt, like it was a bit of a struggle, just kind of a pile up of a bunch of different things all at once with the move down to Arizona, and went into a little bit of a dark place, thought about drinking again. Really, really glad I did not. But today let's just dive into just first off our experiences on alcohol, and then also just what it does to the body, which I think will probably come through our own experiences, because everybody knows it's a poison, right? Our body does not like alcohol. It's not necessarily something that we recommend consuming in large quantities. Obviously, fucking do you, enjoy yourself. Like, I'm never going to tell a client they can't drink. It's more or less like when it becomes a problem, right? I know for me, I've had clients where, the drinking becomes a problem. It's like, well, here's why you're not seeing the results, right? You're drinking 3, 4, 5 days out of the week. Like, if you want to see these fat loss results, we're going to have to put in these little guidelines, guardrails, right? Like some sort of limits on this thing, because for one, alcohol, a lot of calories, right? Especially people are drinking beer, IPAs, 200-300 calories, drinking these mixed drinks with like tons of sugar, like all this stuff. You can easily get up to like 400 or 500 calories of some of these fucking drinks, and they're loaded with sugar. And so, like, let alone, let's not even talk about the alcohol side, literally just the calorie side of things. It's going to pull you out of any sort of deficit, and it's going to put you in a surplus pretty fucking quick. And then we go to the side of things that it's a poison, and the fact that it literally just puts everything, our body just puts everything else on hold until it fully metabolizes the alcohol, right? And so, like, it's putting stuff in, it's going to have the alcohol go through before it even gets to any of our, protein, fats, carbs that it's going to try to digest later on. But Matt, what, as far as alcohol is concerned, do you drink? How much do you drink? What are your experiences when it comes to like health and fitness and including alcohol in there?
Yeah, personally, I don't drink. So it's been a long time, man, since like years since the last time I had a drink or sip of alcohol. And the reason for that is I used to drink quite a bit. So not like excessively where I was out of control. High school I did, college for sure, absolutely. And then would occasionally after that, like events, birthday parties, whatever, just going out. But for me personally, I noticed how far it put me back and set me back. I was super into health and fitness. I was super into improving my physique and my body and my health overall. And I always had these mental battles with myself personally, like where I would go out, and don't get me wrong, we would have a blast when we go out. Like, it is super fun, but it started taking me longer and longer to recover. So if I had plans or ambitions of going to the gym and working out the next day, or even in the next 2 days, and I noticed I would be sluggish. I noticed that when I would drink alcohol, I would also consume more food too. And so that was a big thing that was in company with not just the alcohol itself and poisoning my body, but I would overeat calories. I would not even pay attention to what I was eating. You usually go for the quickest option that's out when you're out and about, right? And so you can easily undo any hard work that you were doing for those first, let's say Monday through Friday, 5 days. And then immediately on a Saturday or Sunday, like holy cow, you can go way over your caloric intake, right? And I wasn't even conscious or aware of it. I was more so, the thing for me was how far it set me back, how I didn't even feel like going to the gym to work out the next day or the 48 hours after. And then when I did, my lifts would be half-ass. I just knew I wasn't myself. I didn't feel like myself when I was in the gym. You would sweat and smell like alcohol, like it's coming through your pores. And so for me, it was a matter of time of how long was I going to continue to keep doing that for? What's more important here? And every time I would tell myself, every time, and this happened multiple times, is like, all right, this is the last time you're going to do this, right? And then the next weekend would come around and I do it again. All right, this is the last time. Until eventually I had to put my foot down. And this is just a conversation I had to have with myself, was like, how many more times are you going to do this, dude? Like, you've earned this. Like, you are literally making your bed and laying in it right now, each and every single time you do this. How many more times are you going to keep telling yourself that this is the last time, until eventually it was the last time? And now I'm not just like super hardcore 100% not drinking, and then, it's not like this super binary thing. Like, I'll have a drink if it's on occasion or something like that. I just don't have a desire to do it, because for me, it's more important to have my body feeling amazing, feeling great, feeling high energy, feeling consistent in my routine, being able to work out the next day, and not have to have that stuff sweating out your pores and affecting your lift and just feeling like shit. I did that too many times, to the point where it just was like, enough's enough. Like, for me, if I didn't work out and I didn't, train or treat my body with respect, and I just really didn't care about that, and I was kind of just going through the motions, and having fun took priority over that, then I'd probably keep doing it. But it didn't for me. Like, it was not worth it to me. And that's nothing against anybody who does that. It just, for me personally, my choice, I was just like, there's not enough upside here. If the upside for me is the only thing is just having fun, and I'm relying on that to have fun in order to have fun, like, my priorities are screwed up. I got to like reassess and like have a conversation with myself in the mirror, and really just assess what's most important. And so that's like kind of my journey with it. What about you, man? I know you have a pretty expansive relationship with it, and you've gone through some battles, but what about you? What are your thoughts when it comes to alcohol?
I relate a lot with all that. I mean, as I've said on this podcast, I mean, the reason I quit alcohol was I just couldn't stop. Like, when I started drinking, it was till I went to sleep, right? It was just, I didn't have that quit. Like, I could not control
Same.
it. So it was like, either I did it and I just got obliterated, right? Or I didn't do it. So like, I didn't drink every day. Like, my addiction wasn't like 7 days a week, like some people's, because I think I actually talked about this potentially last week on the pod, or a few weeks ago, whenever we recorded that last podcast that we did just on what we're doing in our life and body dysmorphia and discipline, all of that stuff that we talked about, where I struggled, where I would have like an alcohol addiction, but I also had like a body addiction, to where it was 3 days of just binge drinking combined with binge eating. And then it was 4 days of just complete restriction, killing myself in the gym, trying to get my body back to where it was. And that just ruined me over time, right? Because it was just stress combined with more stress, right? It was like the stress of drinking, the stress of over consuming food and alcohol and all of this shit. And then the stress of, we're going to bring our calories down to 1,200. We're going to do these absolutely insane workouts in the gym and see how many calories we can burn. And like, it just was craziness. Oh yeah. And what I realized, like, I'm not a big fan of alcohol. I'm not going to ever tell somebody they shouldn't do it, or, especially people that can control it. I always wish I could have controlled it. Like, I think that there's a social aspect to it that's cool, right? Like, just the ability to have a drink. Like, if I had the ability to just have a nice glass of like scotch or like whiskey or whatever on the rocks, like, that would be pretty cool. I think. I just know that I can't. So like, I know myself now, and I know also that, like, starting to do it and starting going down that road, I look back at the rock bottom that I hit, right? I look back at those times, and that was like the darkest moments of my life. It was really, really dark. And like, my view on the whole thing is just that I actually used to track, when I was drinking towards the end, I had a Whoop, and I would track, the sleep, my recovery score. And that really, because before that, I knew like the effect that it had on you, right? It was like, obviously you wake up, you feel like shit. Sometimes you feel like shit till like 7 p.m., right? Like, did you ever have those days where it's like, you're just hung over till 7 p.m., complete fucking waste of the day. Generally you order a bunch of dog shit because you can't move. Like, it's just like, or you don't eat at all. Like, I had some days where I couldn't even drink water, right? Like, I felt so shitty. And that, how many times, like you said, how many times do you have to do that before you're like, okay, like, this isn't fun, right? Like, last night was kind of fun. Like, it was fun to a certain point. Like, you do some stupid ass shit, right? Like, the amount of dumb shit that I've done drinking is absurd, right? Like, some of the stupidest fucking shit where it's like, what? Like, Like, why? Like, what were
we
we
got
thinking?
we got to at least tell one story each. We got to
I'll tell
like,
you
what's
one.
something that you did,
Actually, I
bro?
was
Like,
actually thinking of this. So, like, I was thinking of this today because have you ever like walked on the street or whatever, walk somewhere and you see like one shoe sitting on the
yep,
street, right? Just like, you're like, who loses a fucking shoe, right? Like,
yeah,
who loses a shoe? And I understand, like, nobody should lose a shoe unless it's like a kid's shoe. Like, sometimes it's a kid's shoe. I'm like, okay, like it just
right,
dropped off its foot, how it dropped
yeah,
off his or her foot, right? But for me, I remember one time in college, I think this might have actually been senior year of college, and we were walking to a house party, and there was like mud or something. I don't know what. Like I stepped in the mud, my shoe comes off, right? Like my shoe comes. I couldn't find it in the mud, and so like I threw my other shoe out, and I was walking around in my socks the rest of the day. Like we went to this party, and this was actually like I think it was kind of like a hardo period of life, like whatever this was. Like or actually no, I was protecting somebody, and we got in like a fight actually. So I had gotten a fight in socks, like just absolutely obliterated, and that was
yep,
just stupid. But I lost my shoes. How do you lose your shoes? And
bro.
so like walking around the street in socks and all this shit, like that's the tip. I'm like there's some dumbass stories that I'm not going to tell because I don't, my parents listen
Yeah,
to this and I don't want them to
yeah,
fucking to hear them. But that was just one I
same.
was actually thinking about earlier today when I saw somebody's random shoe sitting on the side of the road, and I remember that
Hmm.
we were doing an alcohol episode. As I was like, I remembered when I lost my shoes.
You're like, I've been there.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
I've
But how
lost
about
my
you?
shirt. That's for sure. I've
Oh,
lost my shirt,
I feel like the
and
shirt comes off a lot, especially if you
bro,
feel good
shirt
about
comes
your
off,
body. Like, you go, you're like, oh, fuck yeah. Like the women have to
bro.
see me with my shirt off.
Start doing push-ups before you walk in the party, like getting the pump going. Shirt's coming off at some point. Yeah, dude. The one I think of is like down by our on-campus housing that we used to have was it Friday or Saturday? I can't remember. Friday or Saturday. One of those days. The next day was garbage day, right? So like all the trash cans would be lined up on the curbs, like all the way down the entire street, a couple hundred yards. And we would go out and we'd be out super late. You're going from on campus, housing to housing. So you're walking along the streets. And for some reason it's always a competition between you and the boys, right? Always. And so we got on the topic of football for some reason, like who was the best in high school, and like who was the fastest, and like who could sack who. If you were a defensive player, like what position would you be? And we got on the topic of defensive end somehow, and we started arguing, and then we started seeing who would be the best, who could put the best swim move on a garbage can, and then you had to go sack the quarterback, which was the next garbage can. So you had to put a swim move, you had to show your best move on the first one, and then go stick a garbage can. We did that all the way down the street. So there's trash all over the street, garbage cans flipped upside down. Like, bro, I probably didn't have a shirt on. Like, you think back to this stuff that we were doing was just insane, dude. We swim move garbage cans, put a hit stick on them, trash flying everywhere. Like, dude.
Oh my
But I mean, I'll say this: it was fun. It was super fun. But when you had that liquid courage inside of you, and all of a sudden you felt like nothing could stop you, that was like dangerous too. Especially with like college athletes, you're in a position where you guys are in super good shape, right? Like your athletic bodies, you put some liquid courage inside of them, they're going to feel like nothing in the world can touch them. And then if they're together in a group, it's just like a group of absolute gargoyles together, like just get out of their way. And so we're just a wrecking crew, man.
God.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories. I'll keep them PG though,
We
because I know parents listen to this too.
oh yeah. We actually had my junior year, I think, of we had like or my junior or senior year, I don't remember what it was. We had like a fucking it was like a wrestling. It was like all the boys on the baseball team, like literally every grade of our baseball team, because it was actually really cool. My junior and senior year, our team was like really tight knit, which is why we were actually really, really successful. Is we had like the freshmen and the seniors, like, and everybody were like really, really close and would like go to the same parties. I mean, we'd even go to the parties with the guys before we go out to the bars. Like we'd go like hang out with everybody, but we had like, it was almost like an initiation. I don't know how this even happened, but we started like, it was like wrestling matches in like full on wrestling matches in like one of the guys' houses between all of the baseball guys, which could have probably ended pretty badly. But I think one guy got choked out actually. Like it was a bad situation, but nobody ended up getting hurt, which was good. But I mean, it literally, you know, it numbs your inhibitions. Everybody's done stupid shit. You potentially end up in jail like I did. I ended up in jail.
Oh, did you?
One night. Yeah. Oh yeah. Got a minor consumption, ran from the cops, ended up in jail. Stupid. Like just
you're
like
booking it on
shit,
foot,
right?
huh?
Just like, yeah. I mean, I could sit here. We could like have like a 5-hour podcast, and I could tell you every fucking story. And it was.
I just wanted to go 1-1. We had to at least tell one.
Well, I'm not going to tell anything else. But basically, what I was saying before we even went to the stories was like I used to track like my Whoop, right? Like, you get the sleep score, you get the recovery score, and I remember waking up like after drinking, like even a few drinks, right? And your recovery would just be fucked. Your sleep would be terrible. And then on the flip side of that, waking up after getting obliterated, binge drinking. Oh. And my recovery sometimes would be 1%. Like my sleep would be, you know, you'd be in bed for 9 hours and it would say that you slept for 3 hours, right? Like you're just like, it's completely broken sleep. It's terrible for your recovery. And that would be like that for 2-3 days, right? Before your body finally gets back into it. And so you think about you're doing that, and even a few drinks really messes up your sleep, really messes up your recovery. You're not going to feel good. You know, you have these hangovers when you really go at it. And as you get older, you know, the hangovers only seem to get worse and worse, right? It's like you just kind of, you talk to people. It's like, oh, like I always just feel like complete shit after I have a few glasses of wine, right? It just seems to do a lot more damage on people as they get older. I'm sure that's probably dependent on the person, but it's going to do a lot of damage over time. And then, you know, just, I talked about it briefly, but just the fact it's so easy to pull yourself into a calorie surplus. You know, it's not gonna, it's nearly impossible to like drink heavily and see fat loss, right? Like I feel like if you're gonna drink, you really got to keep it to a few drinks and really give yourself. I've always found with some of my clients that struggle with alcohol a little bit more, I've found that having like a limit is a really, really good thing, where you kind of have that number where it's like, this is my weekly number. Maybe, you know, maybe you only drink on Fridays and Saturdays or something like that. And, you know, this is my number on Fridays and Saturdays. And for some people, it's going to be hard, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, I got, you know, all the peer pressure from the boys and whatever, because you always get all of that, right? It's dudes pushing, which I was always that pusher. But what you really got to understand is that, like, what do you really want, right? Like you told about how, you know, you used to drink, you just figured out over time that it was just going against what you really wanted. You wanted to feel good. You wanted to look good. You had health and fitness goals, you know, all that shit. Well, if you really, really want that, then alcohol is going to have to take some sort of back seat. And that's not to say that you can't go at it, you know, on special occasions. But what I found is that the special occasions are all the time for a lot of people, right? It's like every weekend's a special occasion, every wedding, every holiday. And when that's the case, you're just really pushing yourself back all the time. You know, maybe if you have like the big major holidays as special occasions, like that's probably reasonable, right? Like New Year's, like the thing is all of them are on like a 2-week span. You know, it's like Thanksgiving, and then you got Christmas, and then you have New Year's and like all that shit. But I don't know. I don't plan on drinking again, but that's, you know, like I said, it's just a matter of people really deciding what they truly want. And if alcohol fits into that equation, cool. But if you decide that you really want to feel really, really good and sleep good on a regular basis and really maximize your potential in the gym and maximize your health and maximize the number of years you have, then you're really minimizing it is probably going to be the best idea.
For sure. And like the relationship that I have with it doesn't have to be the same relationship that my clients have with it too. So my clients have different relationships with it, but it all comes back to this. I always tell them, like, I'll never be the person to tell them, just like you said, like, you're not going to say don't have it or like it's completely off limits. Understand it's not of service to your body. You're literally putting poison in your body. And if you understand that and you choose to still do that, then I'm completely fine with it because we've already addressed it. Right. And so I always say to my clients when they're trying to navigate through it, if they do enjoy doing it for social aspects and things like that, it always comes down to the amount of control that they have when they decide to do it. Are they being peer pressured by a family member or their friend or, to something that they don't really want to do and they're doing it more so to fit in? Or are they doing it strategically, like you said, where they're like, okay, I set a limit for myself in a span of 7 days, like I'm allowed 2 drinks, right? Or when I go out, I'm allowed my 2 drinks. If that's the case, that's a way bigger difference of intentionality and being in control of your situation. And now you hold the reins, like you are in complete control versus you going out, you not having a game plan. You can easily be persuaded left or right. There is no limitation on the amount of drinks that you're consuming, which leads to other things like the consumption of food that comes along with that, mindlessly eating. And so if you're in those situations where you feel like you don't have control or there's a lack of control, then there's a bigger issue that needs to be addressed there. Now, if you go out and you have extreme intentionality and you're like, okay, I'm going to limit myself to 3 drinks, right? And I can have those 3 drinks. And then after that, you switch over to a club soda and lime or, whatever you choose to do, which is what I'm a big fan of. I always do the club soda and lime. It looks like I have a drink. I don't get questioned by people like, and I like stick to my own and they're like, oh, he is having a drink and I'm not drinking. So that's a little trick that I do. But, as long as you are intentional with your decision making, I'm all for it. So if you still want to include it in your life and you're like, this is something that I do, I really enjoy to kind of let my hair down and relax. It's the way I socialize with my friends. Okay, I'm going to ask you to put some parameters around it so that when you choose to do that, you are still in control of your situation, your scenario. You're making your bed and you're laying with it. And you're also agreeing that by doing that, you're accepting the repercussions that come with it tomorrow. To your point, your sleep's going to be like shit. If you have a planned workout tomorrow, you are also accepting that you're still going to make your workout. You're still going to make that commitment to yourself, knowing that it's going to be a less than ideal workout because of what you chose to do the previous night before. And if you can check off all those boxes and you're okay with that, I'm like, boom, go ahead. You can do it, right? It's the people that mindlessly do it, who don't have control, who get easily persuaded by the group of people or the crowd that the environment that they put themselves in. And it's not just the multiple drinks that they end up consuming, overshooting their calories, which lead to them poisoning their body, which lead to shitty sleep patterns, which lead to them affecting the following day, let alone the extra calories that they're going to consume during that night too, just mindlessly eating. That's somebody who's not in control of their situation, their scenario, and their the things that are going on, right? And so there's a huge difference between those two people. And I always try to reframe it and have people look at scenarios of it all comes down to also the size of the tree trunk, right? So if we're chopping down, if you're choosing to drink alcohol, which is a form of an axe, which is going to chop at your tree trunk, how well have you developed the tree trunk? How much damage is that axe going to do? Are you going to go completely off the rails? And that is going to be a super big axe swinging on a very small tree trunk because you haven't done your experience and repetitions and due diligence and leading up to this and building a really huge tree trunk. Like if somebody looks at me, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but if somebody looks at me and I'm drinking, that is a very small axe chipping into a very big tree trunk. If somebody is not in control of their scenario and they're consuming mindlessly their drinks and they're just getting started in their health and fitness, they're swinging a huge axe on this little twig, right? So that thing's going to be chopped right in half. So you got to take into consideration like experience and where you're at in your journey with health and fitness in relationship to the alcohol that you're choosing to consume. So a lot of times we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg, right? So a blanket statement would be like, oh, he's super in shape and he's fit and he's choosing to drink alcohol. You also don't see that this is 1 or 2 times that I drink alcohol throughout the entire year, right? And so you may just be looking at somebody's tip of the iceberg versus making a blanket statement going, oh, he's doing it, so that's okay. I just started my health and fitness journey. It must be cool to keep drinking alcohol because he's doing it. It's like, just make sure you're looking at somebody's entire story. What's the size of their tree trunk in relationship to the axe that's chopping them down or they're choosing to get chopped down by? Because everybody's story is different. And I think that's what a lot of people do is they associate if somebody's super fit or healthy in shape and they get results or results that you aspire to have and you see them doing the thing that you're hesitant on doing, which in this case is alcohol. You got to take into consideration the entire story, their relationship with it. How many times did they do it throughout the year, right? It's always going to be deeper than surface level. So I think that's a huge mistake that people make is they see somebody fit and healthy, like drinking alcohol, and they immediately give themselves the check box of like, oh yeah, I can do this. It's like, well, yeah, you can, but it's a lot deeper than that. So I think looking at each individual situation and scenario and not being quick to like compare yourself to somebody else will set you up. It just all comes back to intentionality and control with your individual situation and scenario. If you choose to include alcohol, in your routine.
Yeah, man. I love the tree trunk analogy. And I also love the fact that you talked about control. I think that's huge. Really taking a look in the mirror for anybody out there and really that, like, do you have control over the alcohol? Because I think that a lot of people don't. I think like, what reasons are you drinking for too? Right. I think it's cool to have a few drinks socially, and I'm never going to tell anybody what to do. Right. Like you can do whatever the fuck you want to do. But like, if you do, like it is easy to have a problem with it, right? I think there's probably a lot more people that do have a problem with alcohol out there than are actually admitting it. And for me, it took me a long time to really admit to myself I did have a problem, right? That it was actually like I couldn't control myself. I had questioned it for a while, had journaled about it, but I never really admitted it to myself for a while down the road. I didn't want to, right? I wanted to just keep doing what I was doing. I thought it was something that just made me more fun, that made me enjoy things more. I thought that like I needed it to talk to women. I thought that I needed it to like just there's a lot of things, right? Like to dance, right? I needed it to be able to get out there and dance, love dancing, but it's like, oh, you got to get a certain amount of alcohol in you before you can really get out there and rip the dance floor up, right? All of these different things. And it's like, oh, at what point am I really relying on this thing as a source of something that I really have inside of me, right? And so it's kind of just take a look in the mirror there. And then also one thing I wanted to talk about was just like making the right decisions or making better decisions when drinking, right? I think that's a huge thing where, if you really want to help yourself out, stay away from the high calorie beers and the high calorie mixers, like mixing with pop and mixing with a lot of these sugary drinks, right? Try to do it on the rocks, try to mix with soda. Like this type of stuff is going to, maybe a White Claw or one of those a million different seltzers out there that are like 100 calories
Yeah.
are a pretty good way, but also track it, right? If you're really trying to see goals,
Yeah.
make sure you're tracking it. Like track the calories for it. If you're tracking macros, what you can do is kind of track it under carbs or fat. That was a way that I've used with clients that I've had use macros in the past is tracking it under like carbs or fat. Now, if you do calories and protein, which is generally the easiest way to do it, a lot less stressful. For most people, don't necessarily need to worry about the amount of carbs and fat that you're eating. Just try to get enough protein in and make sure you're hitting around your calorie goal. Then just make sure you're tracking those calories that are coming from the alcohol, because you'll be really, really surprised. You have a night where you drink like, a few drinks that could easily add up to being 500, 600, 700 calories pretty fucking quickly, even just a few drinks. And so I think about some of the days back in my drinking days where I was having like 20 beers, right? Like that's a solid 2K plus calorie. Like that's like 3,000 calories. And that's not to mention the fact of what you're talking about, just over consuming tons of food. Pretty easy to rack up a 10,000 calorie night.
Dude.
Just with a pizza, you eat the whole pizza, and like anything salty always seems to just funnel into your mouth. You get some chips, a bag of chips is just gone.
Yep.
Like any sort of sweets, like it's just everything. It almost felt like for me when I was drinking that like food just did not fill you up. It was just, you could continue eating and consuming food just nonstop. And so but just watch it. I'd say like just watch it, put those parameters around it, try to help yourself out when you go out and just really just look yourself in the mirror and really, can you stop, right? Like take a month off if you can't, that was a really big alarming thing for me. Was I tried to do sober January for like 3 years in a row, and I failed 3 years in a row. Like you should, you can't stop like that. That's a problem, right? Like I couldn't, I failed 3 years in a row. Even when I had bets on it with people, I'd pay them. Like, just like it, that's a pretty big red flag, right? Like if you fail all that, like but if you can stop, like there's people that like they drink heavily here and there, but then they can stop for like 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. If you have control over it and you do it knowingly and willingly and whatever, cool. But if you don't, like it can get off the rails, and it doesn't happen overnight. It can happen over the course of years, but eventually it can ruin people's lives, man. It can really ruin people's lives if you let it. So I would just challenge everybody out there to just really be careful, because it is something that, and don't fucking drive. Don't be that fucking loser.
Yeah.
That fucking drives. I literally hate that more than anything. Like just people that drunk drive. First off, like you could kill other people on the road. You could kill people in the car. Like it's just fucking terrible. And there's no reason for it. There's Uber, there's Lyft, there's a million different fucking ways. It's going to cost you a shit ton of money. And also it could cost you ending up in jail for your life if you end up killing somebody. So like, just buy a fucking Uber for whatever it costs. It's going to be a lot cheaper than whatever. But I've always hated, people seem to just get that confidence built up with drunk driving where they're like, oh, I can do it like whenever I want to, and I keep getting home. But it's just that one fucking time. All it takes is one time where you something happens, you just something fucked up happens, and you end up either getting DUI, you end up hitting somebody. Like there's a lot of different things that could go wrong.
For sure, man. I think it just comes down to having that tough conversation with yourself. Are you consuming alcohol because you actually enjoy it and you enjoy what comes along with it, and you're willing to accept everything that comes with it, good, bad, and ugly? Great. If you're failing to acknowledge that because you're ignorant, meaning like let's say you're in my program, and there's a couple clients know who I'm talking about when I mention this, but they're lights out Monday through Friday. On the weekends, they have a tendency to go out and drink every weekend. And then when the next week rolls around, they're wondering why the scale didn't move. When, well, you can see my food Monday through Friday. Like, yeah, you have zeros on Saturday and Sunday. I highly doubt that you didn't consume any calories on Saturday and Sunday, let alone the amount of drinks, because I'm looking on your Instagram story and it looks like you had a great time, And so you have to really ask yourself, like, have those tough conversations with yourself. That's the only person you can really have the conversation with. You can't go, okay, is so-and-so going to hate me because I decide to limit my alcohol consumption here? Or is so-and-so going to think of, me in a different way? Like, you have to own your shit. And when you own it and you still choose to do it, that's totally different. That's fine. Like, you're making your bed and you're laying in it. Right. And so when you can do that and you have full ownership of it, chances are you probably have chose to include it, and you've created some guardrails around yourself. Like Alex was saying, the amounts that you're consuming. You're not mindlessly eating food in combination with drinking alcohol. Like, everything's being accounted for, or you're giving yourself a limit. You in some way, shape, or form, you're giving yourself some sort of guardrails to keep on. And when you can do that, that just shows that you're in control of your situation and scenario. But the second you start pointing the finger or blaming and taking that victim mentality and creating no awareness around what you're consuming, both from an alcoholic standpoint and then from a caloric standpoint at the same time, because those usually enhance each other, and you're pointing and you're blaming, that's a conversation you have to have with yourself. That's what I'm talking about. That's when you're being ignorant to your situation that's going on and you're choosing not to take accountability in your own situation. And when you do that, it's easy to point the finger and keep doing and repeating what you've been doing, and you're just kind of going down this vicious cycle. There's no end to it. So if you do want to make change and you do want to hold yourself accountable, I encourage you to have those tough, challenging conversations with yourself and ask yourself, is this serving me? Is this getting me closer? Do I absolutely 100% need to include this in my routine to feel satisfied at the end of the day? And if the answer is yes, then you probably can do it and create some guardrails around it for yourself and still get amazing, phenomenal results. And a lot of my clients do that. They choose to include alcohol still, and they still crush it. And now, could they crush it even more without including that? Absolutely, they could. But if it keeps them sane by including it and they have a different level of intentionality and control around it, and they can control what they're consuming, it's a totally different story. That's a totally different scenario than somebody who is mindlessly going through it and chooses to point the finger, doesn't want to take accountability on. Again, those are opportunities for a tough conversation to have with yourself. And eventually at some point, I know for me, it took so many times to have that conversation because I was failing to have it with myself. I was just like, oh, I made it past this weekend and I got through it. We'll be good for another few days until the next weekend comes around. And then I repeat it again. And I'm like, oh, I should have that conversation with myself. Do I really want to do this? Oh man. And then I breeze by it. And then here comes another week. And it's like this cycle where I keep just like brushing it under the rug until you finally own it, look yourself in the mirror and just have that conversation with yourself. And you'll figure out whether you want to continue to include it with some guardrails and some parameters around it. And you still like the social aspect of it, which by all means, like totally, absolutely keep including it in if you can. You might also find that it doesn't serve you at all whatsoever. And either way, I just encourage you to have that conversation with yourself. And then that way you can go into what the choices that you're making with absolute confidence and conviction, that you are doing exactly what you set out to do. It's nobody else's, nobody else is in control. Nobody else is taking advantage of your situation and scenario. You are making your bed and lying in it, and you're taking full accountability for regardless of what situation you decide to do. And if you do that, you can be successful both ways, with alcohol and without it.
Hell yeah, dude. No, I think the only thing I have to add is like for those people that do want to include it in, if you have those bigger weekends planned, one thing you can do is first off, like eat a quality balanced meal before going out. Like, that can help. And then also make sure you're fucking mixing in those waters. That's going to help the next day, right? Like kind of even alternating. I've always recommended clients, like if you're having like some drinks, like alternate waters, like alternate a water and you're going to thank yourself tomorrow. And like it really, really helps with the hangover. Third, if you can, now this is for people that can, some people can't do this. You can always, like if you're planning, like you're like Saturday's a big day, right? It's like it's one of my big days. Like I'm going to go at it. You can always peel back some calories earlier in the week. Say you're in if you're in a certain type of phase, like a fat loss phase, and you have something coming up, like it's like your own wedding or, one of these times where it's like fucking go nuts, right? Like just do it. I don't ever want, like if you have your wedding or if you have these big fucking day, like, and this isn't for the people that every day is a big fucking day, right? But there's like certain things where it's like, I recommend, all right, like if you want to go at, like, forget about the calories, but you can always set yourself up for success by peeling back even like 100 calories from each meal. Like, or like something as simple as that for somebody who's eating enough and who isn't hungry while doing that could be a really good move to give yourself another fucking 1,000 calories on Saturday, right? And then you give yourself a little bit more room to have that fun, right? Which you can also not do that and be perfectly fine and get back on it on Sunday and get back to it. That's cool as well. But I always love to give people the option because that does work really well for certain people.
Totally. And that's going to what we were talking about earlier. It's like you being in control of your situation and your scenario. That's very intentional. That's very like planning ahead. That's being in control of your situation. That's not letting other people dictate how many drinks you're drinking. Like that's your version of keeping the guardrails on. And if you can do that, like, man, you can enjoy those situations and those scenarios and kind of just let your hair down and relax and do so feeling like not guilty about your situation and your scenario, like you and actually enjoy it. Now, if you do have those one-off scenarios, that one thing that's only going to happen that one time, that wedding, that's totally different, right? Like you can just go off the rails, have fun. That's great. Just understand it comes with repercussions. I think you're more so, and I'm more so talking about the people who instead of your birthday, it's your birthday month, right? And so every weekend is like you're looking for an excuse to party, right? Like those half are the people
birthday.
We're talking to.
Like half birthday, like it's like
yeah, bro. No, it's your dog's birthday. Like no, it's your half birthday, like. If you're looking for excuses to drink, like we're talking to you guys, right? So, but the one-off situations and scenarios, like go ham, go hard, have fun. But yeah, if you're looking at including this on like a more routine basis, or you find yourself making excuses to drink. Like, oh, I had a stressful day at work. It was like, well, every day is going to be stressful, right? It's like, oh, every night's wine night, you know? I think the people that really, specifically my clients that have success with it and they include it almost like on a weekly basis, is they account for it. I'm thinking of one client in particular. She knows when they have book club and they like to drink wine every night on book club, she limits herself to 2 glasses of wine and she includes it in her caloric intake, understands the repercussions that come with it, but it's really important for her to enjoy book club. And that's part of the social aspect. And she makes it work and she continuously trends in the right direction, but she also is able to include part of that life that during her week that's really important for her. And I'm all for it because she's extremely intentional about it. And I'm a fan of that. And so if you can put yourself in those kind of scenarios, just understand it is possible to continue to have success and include alcohol in it. Don't let me persuade you just because I'm telling you my story and I don't drink it at all. Like that's like on one side of the spectrum, but on occasion, I absolutely will. I just don't find it like on a weekly routine basis to benefit me at all. That doesn't mean it's not the same scenario for Alex or the same scenario for you guys. Like you guys have to make your own bed and lay in it. And I just encourage you to be really intentional about your situation, your scenario. And if you can do that, you can choose to drink or not to drink and you can be totally fine with it. So
I love it, dude. Yeah, I don't have anything else. I think that's really good. Like,
that's great.
Yeah, hopefully this has been enjoyable. Hopefully there's some good tips for you, for anybody out there who wants to include it in their plan, which is, like we said, perfectly fine. Like it's something that is just, you got to make the choice yourself and hopefully you have control over it. That's just what we want. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this, share it with a friend, like, subscribe. We drop every Tuesday and Thursday. And if you have any comments, if you want any certain topics in the future, make sure you drop those on our YouTube as well. And we'll make sure we get to those. You can ask questions as well. If you have certain questions, we'll have to do a Q&A episode here soon, Matt, and just kind of ask some questions to our social media and kind of see
absolutely
how we can answer some stuff. But if you have any questions, drop those in the comments of our YouTube here. But otherwise, thanks again for watching, listening. We really appreciate you all out there, and hope you have a good rest of your week.